Woof! Hello, everybody. Today, we're going to be talking about the reseller's dilemma, also known as risk versus reward. So, what is it about us as resellers is risky? Well, everything. And how do we deal with that from a reward standpoint? At what point does a risk become too much of a risk? At what point does a reward become enough of a reward? So we were talking about this, Rick and I were chatting, and it's like, okay, well, we have our own sort of agreements and disagreements as to what's a risk and why it is and what it isn't. And I thought, I need to get somebody else. So thankfully, Mr. Carl decided that he would join us today. So I said to Carl, come on, will you come in and chat with us about what you think risks and rewards are? And he goes, I don't know what they are exactly, but sure. So thank you, Carl, for...
Hey, everyone. Yes. Risk. Yep.
And we got good dog in the basement.
Yeah, you should have worn a striped shirt and have a whistle, Carl.
Oh, that's to be the
Because
referee.
you're going to be refereeing.
Oh no!
I decided to wear my Wonka shirt because with Wonka bars, you never know how many you had to buy if you were going to try and get the golden ticket, right? So it's like that's the kind of risk versus reward, and I would just keep buying more and more Wonka bars personally, and which I probably shouldn't be doing. But generally, I think one of the things that I started out when Carl signed on just beforehand, and Rick and I were chatting, is that as a reseller, our life is all about kind of risks and rewards. Everything pretty well, what most of us do is a risk. We're buying something to try and find people who could buy it from us and hopefully make some kind of profit on it. I mean, well, you don't have to make a profit. You could do it just because you enjoy doing it or you have the time or anything like that. But it's one of those things where you just go, you know what? We are all risking little things. I will thank everybody who hasn't risked becoming a member of the Kennel Club. Thank you so much. You are going to see a new Kennel Club woof coming out for you tomorrow, just so everybody knows there'll be a video that comes out, which is a new woof from us, so watch out for. So if you're a member of the Kennel Club, $3 a month, you can join it easily. You will get that. Thank you so much to everybody. And a big hello, and I'll say hi to everybody. So I got Jennifer, Charmaine, Brian, Donna, Janet, Michael's here, Tina, Arida, I hope I pronounced that right, Louette, Kathy, Heather and Bob, Greg and Kathy are watching on the TV, Candace, Diana, Alisa, we got Kevin, Lisa, Deja Vu Thrifting. Hello, new to this channel. Welcome. Thanks for joining us here. Let's see, who else we got? I hope I didn't miss anybody. It's all about the profit. That's all it is. It's about the profit. So I guess that's the first thing I would just sort of say is, as I mentioned, we think that a lot of the stuff that we do is risks. And the rewards in some cases can be really good or can be really bad. There's lots of ways you can sort of measure both things. So what I wanted to do was show a couple of things that we've actually done to show you places that we've done risks and whether or not we've got rewards or things along those lines. But before I get into that, I just sort of asked Carl, it's like, how do you look at this as a whole for you? As like, do you think of what you do as risky? Like just the idea of being a reseller, is it risky for you?
I think a lot of resellers enjoy a little bit of risk in the hunt and not knowing what you're going to find. And that's kind of the appeal for a lot of people. They don't want to have the same thing every single time. You know, if you're less risk averse, like you might be selling the same thing over and over and over again and happy with that. I like exploring new things. And the problem with exploring new things is sometimes you're wrong. And you buy a bunch of stuff and then it's behind you for like the next year or two on the shelf behind you for the next show or two.
Yeah, we have quite a few of those. I mean, one of the things that I was actually saying at one point is like we have like 1,000+ items listed right now, but there's like between our eBay store, our Etsy store, our little bit that we have on Poshmark, the stuff that we have in our whatnot buy it now area. But at the same time, I probably have a few thousand that haven't been listed easily, from little things to big, huge things. And part of it is literally that's part of the risk reward thing that I'm starting to look more and more at as time has gone on, because here's my big problem as a risk versus reward. This is terrible, but I'm going to admit to stuff here that people, I mean, we sort of said it before, but we've got a ton of clothing. People know that we've got tons and tons of vintage clothing and tons and tons of vintage fabrics. And I bought them because they were so damn cheap.
Oh, the appeal of the cheap. Yeah,
Oh my
I've gone
God,
down there.
The appeal of that freebie, that cheapie. I remember saying, I told people about one time going into this house. This is now before COVID, and it was somebody's attic, and they said, "Oh, just fill up a garbage bag, and you can have everything in it for $5." And it was like, okay, I didn't bring a garbage bag. They gave me an extra large garbage bag, and it was vintage plus size 70s and 80s clothing. Some of it with tag. I'm stuffing things into that bag. It was literally almost the size of me.
Wow.
And I got it for $5. And I brought it back, and I have nowhere to put it. And now I'm paying $300 a month for a storage locker.
Yeah, I was brave the other week. I actually turned down free stuff. I was at a Max Soul, and the guy's like, "Oh, do you want this TV stand?" I went, "No." Even though I was like, part of me is like, "Oh, I could sell that," and then the other part of me is like, with experience now, says, "No, that's going to sit in your basement. It's going to take up a lot of space. The risk there is it's going to be sitting there for years, and then I'll just throw it out anyway." So sometimes it's better to say no.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. I mean, with us, our storage locker, which is half our stuff.
Yeah.
But half the stuff, when we had a bigger space and we moved to a smaller space, we at one point had 2 storage lockers. And the challenge is that I look at the stuff in there now, and I'm looking at it with a different eye, because my risk of getting this stuff for free or for very little money, because almost everything in there is probably very little cost. But now, even if I say I'll take $100 a month of my locker and I'll apply it, that's $1,200 worth of stuff that is now just sitting in a locker. So I'm looking at that and going, I didn't think I was doing a risk, because I was buying something for $5 or I was getting something for free.
Right. But it cost you money
now
in the end for storage.
I don't have a reward.
No.
In fact, I'm losing money on it. So like our goal, literally, Rick and my goal right now is by the end of January is to be out of that locker. Because it's money that's being spent on something that isn't being sold.
It can go.
To the left. It hasn't gone to the left. It's been left in the locker.
That's the left. That's the left. That's the right. That's the left.
The more space you have to store stuff, the more stuff you stuff into it.
I'm much more, like, over the years, I'm much more willing now to donate stuff. Like, I donated a Sony stereo equipment today that I could have got $40 or $50 for. But it's big, it's large, it doesn't sell well at the flea market. And I would have kept that for years, but I just took it to the Value Village and like, here, you can have this, because the reward wasn't worth the risk of holding that stuff. I'm not going to ship it online. It's going to sit and take up space. And it's just like, I'm much more willing to not take the risk on some of that stuff. But I would say, ironically, over the years, I take more risks now with stuff that just is vintage, that I don't necessarily know everything about anymore. And where before I would like look up and make sure I was buying well, right? So an example is I bought this at an auction.
Yeah.
No feet, right? I knew about the no feet. I bought a huge lot of these. I took the risk. I didn't pay much, like $7 for the whole lot. And he's missing a bit. So he's worth about 40 or 50. But if he was complete, it'd be 150 to 200, right?
No feet.
No feet is good. No feet is good. So, but I'm just saying, in the past, I wouldn't have picked stuff up unless I knew for sure. So in some ways, I'm actually taking more risks, but they're educated risks, right?
Right. One thing I saw, it's interesting here. It's like, where did it go? Sherry said that she's paying $150 a month for a 71 foot trailer.
Wow.
That's too big of a trailer. The more I buy more and list, I never even look at the storage. I mean, that's part of the thing that you have to worry about. Elisa says she's been transferring an entire garage worth of inventory into a small townhouse and now giving clothing away as well. Tina got a bargain at $89 per month for a 12 by 20. And again, not necessarily that. And that's sort of, when we got these bargains, part of the thought process wasn't in that. It was in storing them, became like, oh, wow. And now we paid this money out. So it is an expense for the business. So it is like a write-offable expense. But it's still a risk that we ended up doing something that we didn't really think all the way through. Now, actually, I saw something in here, and it's leading into something Carl can talk about too. So, but Kendra made a comment. It's like, sometimes I don't know the true value of items, so I'll buy a big bulk amount, hoping there's some good stuff in there.
Yes.
There usually is, but then you're stuck with all the extras.
Yeah, the extras, you got to get rid of that stuff if you can, especially the low value, the new low value stuff. I just get rid of now.
Well, that leads me to the comment that you had actually mentioned about your friend Scotty, who you do the podcast with. So it's the Reseller Evolution podcast that's out every Friday. You can get that on Apple Play or any podcast area. So you and Scotty do this, and he just recently did something. You were saying it was a big buy.
So he took a big buy. He spent $5,000 on toy soldiers, and it was a private pick, and he knew that there was value there, but he didn't know exactly how much value was there. He just, like, I wouldn't spend that kind of money. I would feel uncomfortable spending that kind of, that's beyond my current risk tolerance. But for him, it was great. And he's going to make, tens of $1,000s on that buy. But he built up to it. And I think, for him, he had enough education to know that at least he can get his money back and so much more. And in this case, he was willing to spend that money up front to potentially make that. And, I've done that as well. I've done buys that it's like not quite sure of and really done well. Of course, I've done the opposite too, right? That's still going to happen, because if you get shy, you're not going to get those 10, 20, 30 times your money if you're going to remember that one time you didn't break even, right?
Yeah. And that's why even when we do all our max solds, that's why we always look at what we sell in a max sold as everything is gone. And the amount of money that we get for something becomes like, we aren't focusing on getting a little for this and a lot for that, but we go over the whole thing and say, well, you know what? We averaged over like $14, $15 per item.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to develop that mindset to think about it, because the alternative is going crazy thinking, oh my God, I put so much money into this one item and it sold for nothing. It's like, no, you can't think like that. It's like, okay, it's gone. I mean, you've been paid for it. It's gone. You might not have gotten exactly what you wanted for that one item, but since you can look at the total auction.
Here's something that we can relate to some degree. Deja Vu Thrifting said, that's why I love selling jewelry. Buying a big lot for a cheap price. Then sometimes just a couple of pieces, you make your money back and sell the rest as a crafting jewelry lot. So, Rick, if those of you may recall who've been to one of our viewed one of our videos before, actually at a thrift or at an estate sale 5 years ago.
Yeah, it was 5 years ago. Pre-COVID.
Had not bought anything. And he saw these bags of jewelry.
Estate jewelry.
And decided that we needed.
Each bag was $10.
All of the bags.
Yes.
So we bought all the bags because the risk.
I negotiated a deal.
But it was like, what a risk. It's only $10 a bag. And let's see.
It's out there. It's out there.
It took 3 years to get one bag opened.
We did a jewelry show with Becky Dick.
Yeah.
And we pulled out a few pieces, and she was kind enough to help describe and identify them. And we did list those 10 pieces. The rest of them sat for a little while.
I think we still have bags downstairs.
We do have like 10 bags left, but we did put a bunch of it in a max sold auction.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we've more than recouped the $110 that I spent.
I think the challenge is that, like, and I always say too, is one of the big challenges I have with the risk versus reward, and it kind of plays into what Deja Vu Thrifting was saying though, is when we sold those 10 things, we sold a couple of the jewelry pieces and we made the money back. So our risk didn't seem like it was that big because there were like a whole bunch of stuff in these bags, but we didn't know anything about them.
And the weight of them sitting.
Yeah. But the
It
bag we
was
opened,
something I wanted to avoid because it was overwhelming.
yeah.
There was
Just the
just
price
so
of this
much.
too, eh? Like if you have something bugging you and it's just tapping you, I have Avon jewelry tapping me.
Yeah.
Like I bought that, and it's like sometimes it feels so good just to get rid of it. But yeah, that's gonna happen.
Yeah, but Craig was very good at coaching me through,
Yeah.
okay, take these 3 bags and set them out, and we will make lots for max sold.
Nice.
So that's what we did. We actually separated everything out. We put like with like, and we came up with 50 lots in a max sold auction.
Yeah.
And some of them sold for $20 and $30, and some sold for $1. But again, at the end of the day, we made a good enough sum from those 3 or 4 bags
Mm-hmm.
that it was worthwhile putting in the amount of effort.
So the interesting thing here, and this is kind of, we're talking about buying in bulk from that. So like Donna was just saying that she bought, there we go, 10 totes of costume jewelry 2 years ago, made a bundle, paid $500. So again, that's something that I think I wanted. This is kind of why one of the reasons I wanted to do this as well was to talk about things that become like, what becomes a threshold for you in terms of risk. Like $500 is a lot of money for somebody to put forth. For us, having all the years that we've been doing this, when we go to a place like Brimfield, we're bringing $1,000 to $2,000 down with us. That is all going to be investment. I have, as in my old Barbie world, I've spent $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 on collections, kind of like Carl said that Scotty did. So, Carl, do you have a threshold like that you know of, or if somebody came to you with one of your favorite things that you've got? Skylanders, I don't know.
Goddamn Skylanders. People keep bringing that up in separate channels. It's like, that was 5 years ago, and it's just funny. I'm stuck with Skylanders.
Do you
have still have your binder?
But do you have a threshold that you would go? Yeah, he does have a binder.
I do.
Yes.
Do you have a threshold that you would think, you know what, I probably wouldn't spend more than $200 or $300 or $400 or $500 on something?
It'd be a lot. Like I definitely wouldn't spend 10,000, but I would definitely spend more than 1,000. So I'm not. Yeah, I think I'm not going to go spend 1,000 just to. I want to see stuff in there that's going to get my money back.
Oh yeah,
and that's
not just randomly. Here's $1,000.
Yeah, yeah.
I've been contacted on things like that all the time, and it's like, I got an entire store. I had somebody contact me about during COVID. Their store closed. It was a toy store, and they contacted me saying, "I got my entire toy stores worth of inventory to sell. It retails at like $50,000, and I'm willing to sell it for $20,000." And I was like, "Well, first of all, if you want to sell it to me, I wouldn't pay more than $5,000.
Yeah, I'd run away so fast.
Retail isn't really retail, and if you've got that much sitting around, then that means it hasn't sold." So like the level of risk there is like too high for me to go, I'm going to spend $20,000. Although I do know of somebody who did a $25,000 buy of a basically a gigantic toy hoarder. And they probably made $75,000 to $100,000 on the buy.
Some of the best buys have been some of the best buys I've heard from resellers have been these riskier, big volume, big amount down.
But you have to look at the full picture for that. It's like, do you have enough space to sort and inventory and hold the stuff while it's being processed?
And the amount of time,
the capacity to do it. In terms of time.
Yeah. Like as you return on your time, like you could say, well, I'm going to make $20,000 on this, but if you're doing you're making $20,000 and you're making like 50 cents a CD, I'd run away so fast. So it really depends. But I think, like I said, every time, like the biggest ones have been that, but I'm not just going to throw away the money and hope. I'd have to, like the ratio would be really extreme. Like you mentioned, like, when Scott bought those soldiers, he's been spending $5,000 on them. Well, he's hoping to get 40 or 50K.
Right.
So it's a big ratio, right? Or you need to know something about, like Scott Vinyl was just on. He was talking about a Barbie buy he bought, and he drove very far to get this, and there was a lot of risk, and he was making $100 just for one set of clothing and stuff like that, and it really paid off. But his wife had experience with that stuff too. It wasn't the blind buy just for the cheap.
if Adrian called us and said, I have an opportunity to buy like a toy soldier lot for $5,000, would you help? I would literally say, yes, you're the toy soldier expert. You look at it, and then I'll invest the money, and then I'll split the profits with you on something like that, if it was that good of a thing. So it's interesting that that's something Susan ended up saying, is sometimes it's the decision is the time.
The risk of time.
That's your risk, is how much time do you want to risk in like identifying and sourcing and everything like that.
And the motivation to do it. Because if it's clothing, I don't care how much money I'm making. I'm not going to do it. I'm just not going to do it. Right. But if it's new and packaged, yeah, I'll do it. You know, there's a big difference. I think some of that's obvious, but you know,
but I would walk. Well, it's kind of in that world, but I'm going to take it down from like 5,000, 2,000, 3,000, and just talk a little bit about some of the stuff that we've purchased, that to remind people about what some of the stuff that we've done, like the risk and was there rewards to it or not. One of the things that I wanted to like some of the things I show is, here's something. This was a max sold auction, and again, $145 is a lot of money for some people to be looking at spending. So this is why I want to show things that are like even $20 or $30 or $40 on a single item can be a big risk. Now, in this specific case, I knew what I was seeing in here. I knew I had to pay another 30% or so on top of this in taxes and commission. So I paid about 195 Canadian for this, 150 US. But I immediately knew that I had this doll, which I could sell and had sold in the box for 300. So I thought, I'm selling this for the one thing. What I also didn't realize until I got it home, the stand this doll was on, we sold for $125. And this doll, even though her hair was gone, completely gone, I ended up selling that for another $100. So this was about a $200 investment that I easily made like $200+ on. So seemed like a big thing, but again, I can buy a bunch of little things for like $2.99 and sell them for $10, and it's going to take me 20 of those things to make $200.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still spending $2.99 times 10. I'm still spending $29 to make $200. So it's also one of those things that's the risk of sometimes you have to spend a little bit more to make that kind of money. You may remember that I bought this beer cat. Mm-hmm. This is part of a Thrifted or Throw It. This super lucky draw, Asahi beer. $25 I paid for this at a Value Village. It was very large. Now, again, this also comes into where you are making sure you're doing the risk part is, would I risk $25 on this? Let me see if I can find a reward. And that's by looking at Carling or Googling, by looking at Worth Point, by looking at more than the 90 days on eBay. So going to the 3-year sort of product research. And yes, I did purchase this for $25, and we did actually sell that for $325 just a few months later. Didn't take very long. And the interesting thing is, when I went in to look and see this, because I had to find it, this is ours through Worth Point. I knew it was ours because of the shot. That's our table that we do stuff on. I found, oh, it's gone. I found actually 3 others that have sold since then for $3.99. So it was a $25 or a bigger spend, but it was to try and turn something that I knew I had a much better shot at.
So that was a good example, like a pottery. I want that risk to reward ratio to be pretty high for pottery.
So yeah, you don't. But when you say that risk to reward, do you mean like, would you buy a $5 piece of pottery, but you need to know it's at least $50?
Exactly. That was the amount I had in mind.
Okay.
Because of the chance of me missing damage, chance of something breaking, I find made the cat's not a good example, but a lot of pottery can take a long time to find the right buyer. So you're sitting in your inventory. You know, electronics can be the same way. I want a good ratio for all the ones that are broken and the testing and all that stuff.
Yeah, Kevin's saying the same thing right now. I'm only trying to buy items that will boost my average sales price on eBay, which is $40 at the moment, and that's a great average sale price. And I think we're looking more and more at that as time goes on. And our main reason for that is twofold: a lot more money, but postage keeps going up.
I want to be paid if I have to ship something. I want to be paid if I need to get out of my inventory. I want to be paid if I have to go to the post office. So I actually purged a whole bunch of under my $15 items
Mhm.
and either put it in my booth or just got rid of it, because what I was sick of having, like, I sold $10 item and nothing else happened to sell, and now I need to go to the post office for the $10 item. I'd rather not sell the $10 item at all.
Yeah, and kind of, I understand that completely. But again, that also comes into play when I was mentioning with posters, because posters keep going up and up and up, and it's starting to be the point where those $10 items, if you sold on, for me, if you were if you used a .com platform as opposed to Canada Post. I mean, Canada Post has some great rates with eBay. So if you are using eBay, they're getting better, but it still can't beat the US prices. But the US prices 3, 4, 5 years ago, it would cost me $3 or $4 to send $10 and $15 items. And now it's costing me $6 and $7 and $8 to send those $10 items. So the items haven't gone up a lot, but the postage is like starting to
The
outweigh
ratio, yeah.
the idea behind some of them. In fact, we're looking, like you said, with purging. I looked at some stuff the other day. I said to Rick, I'm going to put together some big lots that I'm going to try and sell in some of the Facebook groups that are like, for example, the Hallmark group. I've got a whole bunch of Hallmark mini ornaments that I've been listing and selling for $8 and $9. So I've got about 150 of them left. So I'm going to try and blow them out. And instead of waiting for 4 more years to sell them, I'm going to say my risk is there. I've already been rewarded. I got paid for enough of them that they really are free. And so I'm going to try and get rid of them for a big bunch of like money and get the space too.
Yeah, and I know there's like a counter argument too for the purging, that you've already put in the work. Why throw away that work? But for me, it's
the reward.
Well, for me, the reward of getting it out of the inventory, but not even really that. It's just the low value sales I don't like. And I also, there's a psychological thing for me. It's like, oh, I have 1,000 listings. I'm doing good. But if like 500 of those are dead old cheap stock, I don't really have 1,000 listings, right? So
right.
For me, that's important. For other people, I've heard people say, well, why are you doing that, Carl? You already did all the work. And there's an argument there too, I think, in each individual.
Vital Mind says, I feel that way too, Carl. Sometimes I'll choose to ship with Canada Post because it's closer drive than Chit Chats.
Canada Post is so good now on eBay labels. But I'd used the free thing today and that kept bugging out on me. I spent half an hour posting one item because it just kept dying on me. Anyways, it didn't encourage me to use their website that much.
2 to 3 in the morning. Nobody's there.
Oh, yeah.
Kevin said the same thing, Carl. That's why my purge started Q4. Anything under $10 is a pain. Yep.
Yeah.
And then, temporary USPS price increases for the holidays. Yeah, it's a holiday temporary, and then in January it'll go away for a week. Then they'll bring it back as next year's price increases. So I'm just seeing something else here, which I'm not sure. I don't know. Vintage trucker hats. Somebody's talking about those kind of things. And again, it's sometimes that's the one thing is trucker hats are a perfect example where we used to risk money on trucker hats all the time because I saw a couple of YouTube people talking about, oh my God, you can sell dirty trucker hats and get like $100 or $200 for them. I think number one, I think everybody saw those videos. So all of a sudden there were lots and lots of dirty.
The market was flooded with dirty trucker hats.
But Rick knows I would pick up at estate sales, garage sales, everything like that. I would pick up pretty well every one of the hats I could get, and we were picking them up for a quarter, 50 cents, and stuff like that. At one point, I had about 150 to 200.
Oh no, it was closer to 400, honey.
But the risk didn't seem like a real risk. So like in my head, it was a quarter's not a risk. A quarter's not a risk. 100 quarters is a little more of a risk, but you don't necessarily think of it that way. And then it became, I've got no reward. I was trying to sell them. I was listing them. Nothing ended up happening. So my reward ended up being that I ended up putting them in big lots of like 50 on Facebook.
Yeah.
And saying, I just need to get my couple of bucks back on each one of these, kind of like I'm going to be doing with some of the Hallmark. And I had somebody who came and they bought 150 of them. And then they told me, anytime I ever want to get rid of more, just tell them and they'll come and get them. And they were a clothing reseller. They resell on Poshmark and Depop, but they had an audience built in for them. I just didn't have that audience. So what I risked was just effort. I don't know what I risked, but I got no reward for it.
You know, that's okay though, as long like because in other cases you're doing well with stuff, and you might even forget that. Like I sometimes will buy stuff and take the risk of it just to learn the category. Like if it's really cheap. So I bought all these records, these CDs, and these DVDs. Like I'm talking like a big 40, 50 DVDs for $5, $7, right? So quarter or 20 cents each. And actually a lot of the records and CDs I tried in the booth. No one wants this crap, but I learned a lot about doing it. And actually I turned them into coupons for more money than I would have gotten probably for the CDs, right? But the DVDs, I didn't know everything. And I got a DVD set in there that's worth 100 to 150 bucks. So it's kind of like, and I had a fear of buying these big sets because what am I going to do with all these DVDs? So now the thing is, don't go buy anything just to quote unquote learn it too,
Yeah,
right?
like Elisa said, trucker hats aren't trendy. She's actually looks at 2 bins of trucker hats. Like, even if I get stuff cheap or free, it's still 70 cents for stallion, postage, mailer, envelopes, eBay's. My dollar reward is less than that. So it's like a double hit. Yeah, that actually is another thing to think about is with your risk versus your reward. And actually is like, how much time and effort are you spending? How much are your supplies going to be? How much is packing a risk? And you sort of mentioned it with the one aspect of being, when you looked at China, Carl, you said it has to have this much money against it. And Rick,
Yeah.
is the same with the cookie jars that we always talk about that we have had for 2
Yeah.
years now. That was like, we couldn't pass by 30 cookie jars or whatever for $8 a piece. And we still have 24 of the cookie jars at $8 a piece.
No, we don't have
Because
24 yet.
Rick
We got like 12.
because Rick doesn't want to pack them. So the risk
Don't blame him.
is kind of, that was a risk that we should have actually looked at as we were buying them. And that's
Yeah.
sometimes the case is we looked at the reward only.
Yeah,
We
you look
weren't-
at the yeah. It's so
Everything
tempting,
we
isn't
did,
it?
we did actually invest money on buying boxes that would fit
Yeah.
Yeah.
the top of the cookie jar, the bottom of the cookie jar, and then the enclosing box to put them in. And
But
of
when
course, we
bought
use those for other things.
But when we bought those, we were looking inside the cookie jars and they had bills inside them still from the antique malls that this lady had bought them from that said she paid $195 for this one and $175. And so when we were looking at these $8 things, I think all in our head was cha-ching, 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 and then nothing about size, packing, effort, worries, like chips, nothing.
But
Yeah.
again, I have listed several of the cookie jars, and the ones that have sold have all made it to their destinations in one piece.
And the cookie jar got me to sell my vase because you did the
It
Halloween
did.
one, and then
It
I sold my
did,
vase. So it
yes.
was win-win. I think the other thing you just mentioned, actually, another risk is if you're buying into stuff is if the market changes. So you just mentioned with the trucker hats, the market changed. Funko Pops, the market changed.
Yeah,
Comics.
Funko Pops would be a big one that probably a couple of years ago it would be risk it all, risk it all.
Yeah. If you hold on to so it's the thing that you know is hot and you need to get rid of it. But even comic books, you know, those were really hot and they've come down quite a bit from what I understand. So, you know, that's
Some of
just
them still have value, though. It's worth looking up.
Yeah, not saying that. Yeah, for sure.
Heather says, I have Rick on my shoulder saying, don't buy. No, those cookie jars, he was the guy saying, let's buy these. Let's buy these. Bob says the same to you. Thank you. We hoped it was a good topic for chatting about. One of the things that Ray Dunn, yes, that's another thing that was gigantic for the longest time. Beanie Babies. I still have a few, but most of mine have been donated, right? Fiesta Wear doesn't sell like it used to. That's there's that whole, and then there's the swings that come up and go back. Like vintage Barbies from the 60s and 70s are on a rise again, and they were on the biggest fall for the longest time. But in the toy world, Strawberry Shortcake is basically, you can't give it away, the old stuff. But the old Littlest Pet Shop stuff is going crazy, and Polly Pocket is going crazy. So you never know if you, again, I invested in Monster High. I bought a $900 Monster High lot from somebody. So this was just over a year ago. When I found this Monster High lot, it was $900. But I went to look at it, and I didn't know a thing about Monster High dolls. I never sold a Monster High doll until I started seeing all these people on Whatnot, the selling platform, going, God, there's a lot of Monster High shows. And I went and I did a little bit of research on what I had to do. And then I actually looked at what this person had for sale. And this particular person had basically bought everything when they first came out in 2010, 2011, 2012, opened every single doll and placed it in a bookcase. They'd never been played with. Their hair still had plastic on it or elastic still on it. They still had, like, some of them still had their accessories attached by elastic where they would have been in the box. So for me, I looked at that and I thought, I added up. I did a Google search, a Carl search on a couple of the things. And that's $100. That's $100. So I didn't have a problem in spending $900 on this. And actually, I got back over $1,000 on it within the 2 shows I did on Whatnot. And that was not even a high value platform. So I bought some more based on that. But then once I done a couple of them, I said, I'm going to move on to something else, because then it became almost too saturated, too many people doing that. Yeah. So I thought, I'm going to pull back a little bit. So one thing that you do, Carl, that's a little different, and I know there's a couple of people here who have done it. We've done it in the past, but you took a risk by doing a couple of different things. One was you took a risk by going and taking a little shelf, I think you said, at a friend of yours. It was like a comic book store or something.
Yeah. He had it's called the Nostalgia Warehouse here in Ottawa, and he sells vintage toys, comics, records, that sort of stuff. And I wanted to try having an antique booth without the commitment, so I just took a little shelf, and it wasn't. It was just too much work, and I wasn't really making a lot of money because it's just too small an area. But it gave me a taste for it.
So your risk was how much money that you went? I can risk this much.
It was $65 a month.
Okay.
For this little, basically small glass shelving unit, right?
Yeah.
And it was interesting, but it wasn't really worth it. And now, but what it did allow me to do is go, okay, I kind of enjoyed that. So I thought, well, I'll do an antique booth. But then I actually had problems getting one. And so I decided to do this flea market thing I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Now, the flea market booth has been very interesting, but it's not profitable. It's 10 hours of my day on Sundays. And last Sunday, I sold $13 worth of stuff.
Oh.
But you have the experience of talking to lots of people.
I really enjoy that. I'm not looking at my clock the entire day. And the weekend before was 130. So usually it's around like 70 or $80. But I've really enjoyed talking to people. And but the thing is, I'm trying to figure out what sells there. So there's a lot of risk. Actually, the risk isn't really the money, because it's $34 a Sunday at the flea market. The risk is my time, because that's 10 hours. I need to, Rick, cover your ears. I need to get up at 6 a.m.
Oh my God. That would kill me.
Yes. So first stop is for coffee at McDonald's.
Well, no, it's interesting though, because there, in a way, you also said, like, you've got a different measure of a reward too. I mean, and that's just
really enjoying it.
Like, you're talking to people and doing that kind of interaction is a secondary reward. It isn't necessarily a monetary reward. And I think that's something else that some of us do have to look at, is the reward for some of us, and the risk is going to a thrift store, doing a little shopping, maybe talking to people, maybe yelling at them because they get in your way, maybe or they're going to run over your foot, or if you have that ability to just find that little thing. Your reward is the hunt. It's like some people, that's the risk and reward is just that. It's the hunt and the find. Knowing you can potentially sell it is great. And if you do actually list it and sell it, it's even better. But God knows, I can't really say much about that, because I have hundreds of items that I've hunted and I've gone, oh my God, look what I found. And I still have them in the boxes. And every time I open it, I remember, I go, oh, and it's like experiencing it all over again. But I still haven't sold the damn thing.
I have a couple of things of $1,000 behind me. And the joy was in the, like, oh, I found it. It's like, I don't want to just sell it and forget about it. Like, I want to keep enjoying it. Look, I found $1,000 thing.
So that Hercules happiness,
yeah.
Hercules can sometimes be the reward in itself. And I did like, actually, when we used to do toy shows, we'd take a booth at a toy show for a weekend. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed talking to people. I enjoyed selling the stuff at them. Rick hated them, hated the people, hated getting out.
I'm not good with people.
I love it. I'm surprised how much I actually, I knew I was a people person already, but I love meeting the customers. They come back and talk to me, and, I'm exhausted at the end. Like, I have like 2-hour naps after, because
the good thing was we ended up doing it. I did it with Adrian. So Adrian would work the booth with me, and Rick would just be responsible for setup, going home, bringing us lunch, and then coming back for the breakdown.
Hey, to each their own. Like, sometimes, like, the risk is just trying something to see if you like it. because like for me, the biggest risk was reselling. I thought I would hate it. I really thought I would hate it. I don't want to deal with customers. I don't want to deal with issues. I don't want to, worry about selling stuff. But sometimes you do it and you're like, oh, this is great. But sometimes you do it and it's like, I hate this. Clothing is a good example for me. I did not like that.
Yeah.
So.
Diana's saying the purging and also getting space back and the mental relief
Yes.
of not having old inventory or stale inventory in the death pile. That is, So that's one of the rewards that I think some people don't necessarily look at, is just the reward of not feeling like you're pressured. That's why we always tell people, look at your stuff. Don't be afraid to donate it. We're getting much more like, as a couple of you said, like Carl said and Kevin said, like, I'm not going to look at this stuff. It doesn't have a huge value to me. If I can do something on a show like a Whatnot show where I'm doing $3 and $4 things and I can whip through some stuff, that's great. But if you don't have access to Whatnot and you're not going to sell stuff for $3 locally, or you don't want to, I don't want to put stuff for $3 and $4 on Facebook Marketplace. I see people doing that all the time. And I know. Like Charmaine does a lot of stuff on Facebook Marketplace. Charmaine and Brian do. And I know Lisa Bolin does a lot of stuff locally. We've not had a lot of success locally. That one thing that I showed you, I think I showed you the easel that I bought. That easel had at least 20 pickups not show up.
I hated Facebook Marketplace.
I had at least 5 scam things.
Every morning he'd say, hey, someone's coming by to pick or look at the easel.
Oh, I want this. Can you mail this to me in Barrie? And I'll just send you the money now. I can hold it here. Just send me your email address. And like, oh, you need to go to this to get your to get the money sent because it's not working properly on my end on PayPal. It's like my e-transfer's not working. I'm like, scam.
I tried it. I hated it.
Some people are lucky and they do well with that and they don't have a worry about it. There's also the issue of having to, in some cases, people don't have the space or place to have that meetup. Like that risk is more to get the reward. You don't want people risking coming to your house.
My autocorrect is finally not suggesting duck you.
Heather made a comment too. The reason we had a booth at an antique mall, we lived in an apartment and it was storage before eBay.
It is like storage, isn't it? Like it's like, oh, I can buy more stuff because I just took a whole bunch and dumped it off at the place. Yeah, my flea market is like permanent storage there. So
I know that Kendra made a comment. I have to learn to only touch your inventory once idea. Sometimes I look through a box and I don't feel like listing it, so I close the box and look for something. Yeah. Oh, been there, done that.
Still doing it.
That's a t-shirt.
No, I'm not doing that much nowadays. I actually said to Rick, I'm going through this stuff. This is going to go into Max Sold.
Our dining room table was clear for Thanksgiving dinner.
Nice.
Awesome. But I was looking at it and it was going to become, I opened a box and I looked at that and I went, I've opened this box 10 times and I've closed the box. And it's like, no, I got it. That's another reward, is getting rid of something like that, is trying to do that. But so you're enjoying it for a different reason at the flea market. I know we've actually looked at booths at antique fairs and antique malls and things like that. Depending upon where you are, it could be something that is really good as a risk and reward. The risks involved are the amount you have to potentially pay if they actually charge you a fee on top of that, which we had an issue with, and then trying to make sure you can get to it and restock it and all that sort of stuff. So we had a challenge where we had a double size booth, became a single size booth, became half size booth, and then we went out because we were going months where we weren't making the rent of the place. And so that followed into the next month, and we'd be going, wait, we just did $400 worth of sales, but our rent was $560.
And the inventory management was spotty at best. I know things walked away.
I had that issue too. Yeah.
Boxes were opened and the contents were missing.
Yeah.
Things wound up at other people's booths with our tags on them.
Yeah, had that happen too.
It didn't happen, it wasn't all of our inventory, but it was enough to notice.
It was very annoying, especially when you're just like, where did this go?
But the things that we really valued were kept in the locked cabinets. Anything else was like, fine, someone walks away with it. Who the heck cares?
Yeah, Heather says lots of theft. We had a couple of things stolen. That's true. But again, that our risk was risking the $300 or risking the time in there, and that was a lot more of a time risk versus a reward. It was a way to get rid of stuff that we didn't want to ship, we thought would break, or things along those lines. So, and if I had some place that was cheap, I probably would think about doing it. I actually thought about doing a toy show again table this year, but I didn't want to bug Rick about it. I might think about doing it next year. You do garage sales and things like that as well. But I have another question for you, Carl, which is more in that sort of risk world, is what kind of thing do you do if you can't find comps?
I knew you were going to ask
Do you
that.
risk on things like that?
I do, and I have an example. So I picked up this today. Guess what this is?
A chest.
Yeah. So I paid $15 for it. Oh, it's very heavy, very big.
What do the pieces look like?
So
they're
very cheap in plastic, but you know what they are? It's Franklin Mint, right?
Okay.
So
was it medieval or Eastern?
It's not politically correct. The Emperors of the Orient chess set, right? So I couldn't find comps when I was out there in the wild, right? And it's $15 for that big thing. And in the past, I would never have picked it up because I didn't have a market for it. But I know I've been selling chess stuff out of the flea market booth. I took the chance. In the past, I would never pick that up, even though it's $15. But in this case, I decided, okay, so your question was, what happens if you can't find comps?
Yeah.
In this case, it's such a big thing. It's a chess set. People still like chess sets. I knew I can get my, just flip sticks just said, I knew I could get my $15 back. And I couldn't find any comps. And the thing is, what gets really hard is when people are asking a lot of money for stuff and there's no solds, right? Now, I'm not going to say I'm going to get this, but when I got home, I checked Terapeak. And you can check that on mobile, but I always forget to do it. And there's been a few solds of $500 American for that set.
Wow.
Which is great, right? So the question is, again, you asked, what happens if I can't find comps? Exactly. The thing is, if it's unique, if it's an item I know is demand, I will. If it's cheap enough, I'll still buy it.
Carl.
Yeah, I know. Isn't that crazy? That's
phenomenal.
Yeah. And that was just today. So I picked that up. So I will take risks. In the past, I would never even looked at that chess set because I went too big. But for that kind of money, I'm willing to even ship it. I'm not going to get that.
One sold in the package in 2022 for $17.50.
I know. Is that crazy?
Holy crap.
Yeah.
Well, we've actually done that as well. This is something that Rick picked up, but he grabbed at Brimfield a year ago, and it was a comp that we could not find anywhere. We still to this day have not found comps for this. It's a metal tiered shade. So these vintage shades, we've actually seen them and sold these. If this was in all green or all red or an atomic kind of color or anything, square, we've seen these sell for like $100 plus for just the shade. And so we bought this shade. Rick grabbed it and he said, how much is the shade? And it was $65 US. And we have not had one bit of, we haven't had offers even being able to send. No, there's been no nibbles whatsoever on this. We have it on Etsy. We have it on eBay. Right now it's listed on Etsy for, I think, 150 US. So I'm actually at the point where that risk is becoming now the reward is not there. So that's one of the things that we're also looking at is at times now we have to go, our reward is not coming. And now it's time to cut the cord. And that's one of the things that I don't think we're going to actually make enough money on but I think I'm going to have to try to get rid of it. I think we're going to end up having to do something like probably go, okay, it's got to go. We're going to list it for $50. And if we can at least make some of the money back, because that's another thing about risk and versus reward is you're putting money out. When is it returning to you? Do you have anything that you look at like that, Carl, or you've started looking at to say, well, you know what, this money was put out here. Now it's time for me to do something about it. I got to get something back on it. I don't even care if it's a loss.
So in the flea market, I don't mind taking discounts, and a sale's a sale, and I'll get rid of it. Much more so than eBay. eBay, I'm willing to hold on to stuff for a lot longer because generally it's just in a thing somewhere. But also, like I said, I did a purge. So I did get rid of a whole bunch of stuff that I felt was no longer worth it. If it's something big like that, like I said, I donated a $40 or $50 stereo today because I just didn't want to. It just took up too much physical space. So yeah, and I do buy bad buys all the time. Like I think I showed it on the show. I bought a whole bunch of these.
Yeah.
Right. And I spent $350 each, and I got like 40 or 50 of these. I can't even remember, maybe even 60. So I spent a couple $100 on them. You know how many I've sold? One. Sold one whole thing. Do I regret it? No, because the risk was still worth it. The worst case scenario, I'll probably still get like a little bit of money for these. And what I don't want to do is not buy the next lampshade like that, because
Right.
I know with Rick, he's bought so many amazing things on his gut that have been very valuable. So the last thing you want to do is remember the light shade and forget the really good,
all the other stuff. Yeah.
all the other stuff. Yeah. So
I've had a few misses this past year.
Yeah.
and you're gonna have a few misses next year too. Like it's just it's part
Well,
of that risk
again,
reward.
that's the topic: risk
Yeah.
versus reward. Sometimes you're risking stuff and you don't get the reward, and that's kind of what I was saying. There is about. That's why we've done a risk, and we'll go to a point where, like, I'd probably stick, Carl, with those things you just showed, those Nintendo things. I'd probably stick with them for about a year, and then if I still have them in a year, I would probably start going, you know what? I don't care if I'm getting rid of these at $15 a piece, because if I can throw them out at $15 a piece and I can make my $150 back on them, or $100 back, that's the time when you have to do it. And that's actually Kevin said sometimes you get the money on dead inventory so you can actually redeploy it in part of that way. It's part of doing business, just not reselling it with all business, but he tends to lose money on his spite purchases. That's
when we're at an estate sale and Craig has bought things I don't want him to buy, so I will find something to buy.
Well, again,
like a drum.
I'm going to show you one other one that we guessed, and I can't remember if this was Susan or not, but I think it was Susan who had, or it was Lisa who had a Max sold sale, and she had sold a one of these waterfall rain lamps, and the waterfall rain lamp that she bought, she sold for like $400.
Oh yeah.
So we were like, guys, grab this one. So we grabbed this waterfall lamp, and we paid, I think, $30 for it.
Yeah, that one was.
And it was like, okay, great. What did we get? We didn't get $400. We thought the risk was there, and what did we get for it? We got $123. So it's okay. But then what did we go about doing? We bought this damn thing for $80 US, and it sold for $80 Canadian. So our risk versus reward here was that we actually learned that what we probably should have done was at least try this on Facebook. So it's the risk that we didn't like to get a better reward.
Yeah. You gambled a bit on whether
we gambled. We literally brought that thing back the day we were closing the Max Sold auction. So we put it right in right away. We didn't even take a shot at putting it up there. I'm sure we could have got $250 or $300 for it, but we ended up trying to flip to get that reward so fast that we actually lost our own risk.
It was also huge. It took up half a shelf.
Yeah. The large stuff, I want a really good ratio to pay off, or like the technical things like typewriters. I may have bought a couple this week.
Kendra said, I ran into a reseller. She said she stopped selling on Facebook Marketplace because it was making her hate people.
Yeah.
Well, I'm one step ahead. He already hates people.
Susan loved her booth. She started with one and now has 3. She makes great money and makes great friends. So
so many friends. Yeah.
It's what's your own version of a risk versus a reward on something like that. This was the other risk that I couldn't find anywhere. If you remember, I found this thing for $9.99 at a Goodwill, and I just knew, like, this was a risk, but it was like, I think it's a store display. I can't find any maker. I don't know what it is, but it's so 70. I had to get it, and that's when we sold for $410. So again, that was a $9 risk. Some other people wouldn't have even risked that because it was so big. Yeah. And again, that's kind of another thing we talked a little bit about. It's like the physical size of stuff. How do you have a judgment as to, is there a certain size you'd like, Carl? Are you like,
Well, that chest head's probably as big as I want.
Okay.
Yeah, but sometimes what's been hard for me is for Charmaine was just saying there, high profit or fast sales. Getting used to the fast sales and not getting full profit has been very difficult for me in the flea market.
Oh yes.
I like getting full value and
Oh,
just like
Craigie,
not
we have
getting
an example of that
okay.
this
What?
week. This week, we
Size doesn't matter. What?
we went on a listing spree over the weekend,
Mm-hmm.
and Craig priced a couple of Christmas items. There's a vintage star tree topper. You can find it, Craig. I can't show my screen because my system is kind of goofy. But
Oh,
yes,
should I?
yes, you should. You should, because this is part of the discussion: risk versus reward,
Mm-hmm.
and also the fast dime versus the slow nickel, or whatever that
Yeah.
saying is.
Yeah. Yeah.
My opinion is that Craig underpriced it, and when he launched it for sale, it sold within minutes.
Oh yeah. Then you've done it.
So I looked at my phone, the
Mhm.
notification on my phone, and said, "Holy crap, that sold too quickly."
Yeah.
And from my tone, Craig inferred that I was challenging him on his pricing, which I was. But he said, no, he talked me through it. I did all of the research, and
Mhm.
this one is plastic. The ones
Mhm.
that sold for higher amounts are metal. So still, I walked back my, oh my God, you underpriced this, to, hey, we made a $60 sale for
You did not walk
5
that
minutes of
back.
bliss. Yes, ultimately I did.
You did not walk that back. You're bringing it up again
Internally,
now, so you did
my
not walk
internal
that back.
dialogue walked it back.
I am struggling with that because I am greedy and I like getting top price, and not getting top price at the flea market is hard for me.
Yeah.
And people are bugging me who listen to the Reseller Evolution podcast about it, because they say, Carl, you need to let it go, let it go, let it go. It's like I find it so hard. I'm working on that skill.
Well, the thing for us, or for me, I have to consider that our eBay sales are really depressed,
Hmm.
continued to be depressed. We're going into Q4. We need the sales. We need to clear shelf space. So whatever Craig is listing the opening price at, or the price at, he has a reason for doing so. So I will trust him going forward.
And again, part of the risk versus reward, and I think we might end on this because we're getting close to the hour, is that the other way to think about risk is to try and set things up the way you think that you might get money, or what you need to get in terms of money. And so, Carl, I think when we were talking about what sold, you happen to have shown a Mighty Max.
Hmm.
Little figure, like the male
Yeah.
version of the Polly Pocket. And I said, oh, I found one of those that I bought, and it was $3.
In a blue box. Look for the blue box.
So we actually ended up looking at it. We found it. This is it.
Yeah.
It's the Mighty Max Magus. And I've seen it sell anywhere from $75 to $200. It has all its pieces. It's in amazing shape. Rick did some great pictures. So I decided to list this. It's been up since just literally a day, and we're at $102 in bids.
Oh, it's not over yet. Oh,
Yep.
nice.
No, we got 5 days left on that. So that was the other way, is to think of things as risks, to go, well, I don't know what I'm going to get for this.
Mm-hmm.
I put this Fisher Price. We got 4 auctions on right now. This Fisher Price thing that literally we were using to test things. And I looked it up and found out it could be anywhere from $50 to $150. My risk is I'm putting it at $76. I started at $75. So my risk is getting the money, and my reward hopefully will be a lot more. But if it's not a lot more, that's okay. I'm still getting that kind of money. Then this was actually something that I found as well. It's just a piece of paper. It was a Toys R Us flyer.
Yeah, this I wasn't sure why he was having me
He
take
said, why are you
pictures of.
auctioning this? And I said, because it's an old Toys R Us flyer. We've had 2 bids for it, and it's up to $22, and it still has 5 days left.
And that's the damaged one.
And we have 2. So
Nice.
sometimes the risk versus the reward can be looked at in another way, which is think about taking your risk and moving it into an auction. And again, if you're new to here at Two Dogs Digs, we have a video on their top 5 tips for having auctions. It works really, really well. It's actually our #1 YouTube video. We got nearly 30,000 views to it, which is great because it's like, oh my God, we got 30,000 views to something. And we've had it up for a couple of years, but it really is the exact thing that you want to have for you're just going to say, I need to figure out what I'm going to do and what I'm going to risk on this, and whether or not it's going to be worth anything. It's like, again, I put this, I'll show you one more. We put this clown mask up, and this clown mask, I just thought for the hell of it, $2.99. I paid $2.99 for it. $81
I hate it.
for a clown mask.
Oh my God.
So that's the other thing to think about is
The second that went up live for auction,
Yeah.
I was getting messages.
I was getting messages. Would you sell it for 60? Would you sell it for 60? Will you ship
Do
it to
buy it
UK?
now.
Will you-
Do buy it now. Add to buy
Oh,
it
wow.
now.
That's a good sign too, eh?
Yeah. The white background is actually, that's real brick. We do have fake brick too. That's on other stuff. So,
Yeah, if it's pure white, it's in our dining room. If it's got
it's a gray. It's our
fake
fake
out,
wall.
we have a fake brick backdrop in the basement.
But I think the key to this is just that when you look at it, everybody has different levels of risk versus what they think of as a reward. Risking a little bit of money, like $2.99 for something that you think can sell for $20. If that's the level of risk that you're happy with, that's great. If you want to spend $1,000 on something that you think you can make money on, again, it's up to you. If you want that, that's your level of risk that you're happy with. If you're happy with risking stuff that's going to take up space and potentially cause a divorce in your house because you have too much stuff, or you can't clear your dining room table, that's a risk you might want to take. But if you can reward your spouse by taking them on a vacation to the UK because of all the stuff you just sold, then that might be the reward that your spouse needs for the risk that he had to have of having no dining room table. Is this
Hopefully
a
my
real life
wife is there.
example? I'll let you decide. But is that like, Carl, what do you think? Is that sort of like risk versus reward? Do you have one versus the other, or are they both just as equal to you?
They're just equal. Like it's what I enjoy is the risks, like in the reselling and the buying and what's going to happen and the unknown and all that stuff. That's why I do this, not for the monetary, but for that stuff. So,
well, I think the monetary has little something to do with
it. Monetary, for me, it's like a scorecard, to be honest.
Well, it also gives you something to do, so you're not going to become one of those lazy, chubby people like in Wall-E.
Oh God! I
thought floating around.
If you had looked up, I would have just.
Oh.
Thank you for joining us for the Reseller's Dilemma: risk versus reward. A certain person just risked the idea that I'm making him any dinner, so he's getting no reward for being on the show with us tonight, and we can guess that that's not Carl. So
I had to make
in the Kennel Club again, thank you so much for supporting us, and you look for it in the next day or two if it takes you 2 days. We will be giving you a new watch out for your Kennel Club members. But thank you all who were watching beforehand, watching afterwards. We love you guys all being a part of the show, and especially all the comments and everything. Who knows what topic we're talking about next week? I think I'm going to start talking about Christmas, because I think we're getting a little closer to Christmas, and we might need to start talking about it a little bit more because Halloween's almost upon us. So we will see you next Tuesday with our sort of talk about what to look for Christmas for reselling once you get into the thrift stores. Thank you so much, Carl, for your opinion. It's very highly valued as somebody who has a different way of looking at things than we do. So I thank you so much for joining us here. And thanks to everybody.
You're wrong, Carl. You're always wrong.
No, you're wrong. You're wrong.
Oh,
you're
I
wrong.
love a good debate.
Wait till this stream ends. Bye, everybody.